And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, planet.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Echo down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
145! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's Mobile Launcher-1's return from pad 39B. I know it says 37B, that's the ULA one. Back to what has been several months out there on 39B for Artemis testing. We are, look, you can see the countdown clock on the top left. It's excitement building because we're in now 7,985 hours to launch. So we're going to do live coverage from now until then. No, thankfully not. We thought we'd go commentary for about an hour or so during this lovely sunrise at KSC as it returns down the crawlaway. And thankfully, we have an expert to take some questions for you. Say hello to Philip Sloss. Hello, Philip Sloss.
Good morning.
We also have Adrian popping in now and again, looking for questions that you'll be sending. You know the routine by now. Do at NASASpaceflight in chat, followed by your question. It goes into a panel, and we'll try and see if we can find a question that catches Philip out, because I think you'll have a job on, because Philip knows his stuff on Artemis. So, what we're looking at right now, we're looking at the crawler transporter bringing back Mobile Launcher 1 back down the crawlaway. It's getting closer and closer to our cameras, which we have at KSC, which you normally see on Space Coast Live all the time. And the closer it gets, the more we can do some zooms around the actual structure itself. And we'll also be able to see it get closer and closer to the VAB, which is where it's returning to. I think one thing we can do start from the start, Philip, is discuss what is inside the VAB, because they literally have the rocket that will sit on this mobile launcher inside the transfer aisle itself, isn't it, Philip?
That's right. They're only missing a couple of pieces. So the core stage 2 is in the transfer aisle. The launch vehicle stage adapter is in high bay 4, so that connects the core stage to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, which is like the in-space second stage for SLS. And then the solid rocket boosters, except for the nose cones on top, are actually basically a couple of blocks away in the rotation processing and search facility. So SLS is pretty much sitting around waiting for stacking at this point.
We also saw an update from Ground Systems, who said they actually weighed the core stage yesterday. And people are saying, why would they weigh it? It's not even stacked on the mobile launcher yet. It's to do with flight trajectory or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it isn't just typically they call it weight and CG. So they need to know they need to know where to steer the rocket, and they need to know the center of gravity of the vehicle, which is of course in flight is going to change continuously. So they get a dry weight and CG, and they'll do accounting for, if you saw the pictures, they've got transportation engine covers on it right now. They'll change those out with the flight ones, but what would be interesting is I think the number was about, and I apologize, I'm using English units, but I think they said it was about 216,000 pounds. If I did the math right for the approximate numbers we were given for Artemis 1, that stage would have been about 219,000 pounds. So it would be interesting to get it confirmed that it actually is a little lighter than the. But again, we don't know what the context is for that number, which is kind of the whole point of this, is to figure out what the context is.
You would be surprised to hear that there's many questions already coming in relating to both Artemis with Starship as well. Now, we can do a lot of crossovers because yesterday during our upside, I think it was a good question because people were talking about how the towers at Starbase relate to what they're using at KSC. And the fun thing about these mobile launchers is everything is there and it literally is rolling. And they don't do that at Starbase. They've built a tower. They may do a mobile launcher for the orbital launch mount. That may be the potential going with Tower 2. But with this structure, it's the entire thing. It's the mobile launch platform we saw from the Space Shuttle program and the tower on top, isn't it? So how much does the whole thing weigh? Do you know how much the whole thing weighs?
Oh gosh, that one I'm not sure of. I think it's on the order of about 15 million pounds, but that I can't remember if that includes the vehicle or not. But it's very heavy. Go ahead, Adrian.
I have the power of Google that, so I don't know this number, but I Googled it just now, and apparently empty it's 11.3 million pounds.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy. It's fun because there's lots of synergy with these questions where Telsar, that question came from Supersonic Retro Propulsion, which is one of the best usernames I've seen in YouTube so far. And Telsar asks, is the ML moving faster than if I had a rocket on top? So you had the SLS with it when they roll back out to 39B for Artemis II. I mean, that's when we're talking about serious weight, aren't we, with the SRBs and what have you?
Yeah, the vehicle, a good deal of the weight, but not all of it, is the liquid fuel that goes into the core stage on launch day, and then the ICPS as well. But the solid rocket boosters are fully fueled, and so the vehicle adds. It's not quite the same weight as the structure, but it's a good significant portion of the weight of the transport of the what the crawler transporter has to carry. So it's probably it's probably. I mean, it's several million pounds just with the solid rocket booster propellant. That's the heaviest thing on the vehicle before its first motion.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we were talking about the Starship relation, but I also brought up the shuttle relation because the Space Shuttle wasn't like this either. The Space Shuttle would roll out on basically the structure you see at the base, which was called the mobile launch platform. And it would basically be rolling out with that to a tower at 39A or 39B, the fixed service structure and a rotating service structure. And Philip, you were talking before we started about watching a rollout with Endeavour where the tail was bouncing because people don't realise the only thing they're holding the actual space shuttle on the mobile launch platform was the SRB bolts, wasn't it?
Right. It was their SLS is still using the space shuttle solid rocket booster hardware, including the aft skirts, and each booster has 4 hold down points on it, and so yeah, that was the weight of the vehicle, and then but I mean you had a fairly hefty orbiter cantilevered off the side of the vehicle, and so yeah, you would see there was. I remember looking at some B-roll video, and this is 1992. First rollout for STS, only rolled out for STS-49, but Endeavour's first launch. And so there were a couple of the STS-49 crew were hanging out on the mobile launcher platform, and so they were right next to the tail, and you could see the tail bobbing up and down as the crawler took it out to 39. I believe it was 39B for that launch.
Kind of amazing that was allowable because of the TPS on the space shuttle, on the orbiter itself. With the vehicle bouncing up and down the crawlerway, they must have done some checks at the pad to make sure that nothing had fallen loose, shall we say. I'm making it sound very unprofessional, but I'm sure they knew what they were doing. I always use that caveat, by the way, whenever I think, oh, that might be a concern. I'm thinking, well, it's okay. There's some very clever folk who already thought about that, and they know what to do in the case of anything going wrong. But yeah, it's amazing the vibrations involved with going up and down this crawlerway. This crawlerway is fascinating because they actually have a water truck. A lot of people do been asking just in chat about the water truck that goes in front of the actual rollout and roll back, and that is basically to keep the dust down so it doesn't affect the crawler tracks or something, wasn't it, Philip? I recall from memory. Yeah,
it's also to keep the crawlerway, the leveled as much as possible, and the requirements for that have gotten more strict over the years. And so they actually had some issues, I think, during Artemis I, where they had to go out and do some grading work on the crawlerway up closer to the pad. So as they go over these rocks, the weight of the structure will break those down, and so you get dust around those, and they don't want that to get into the moving parts of the crawler, or at least minimize that as much as possible.
Hey, Adrian, have we still got you on comms?
I am here.
I've got a question for you. I don't want to burden Philip too much, especially when it's a lot of Starship questions. Johan M asks, when both Artemis II and Starship, or I would say Artemis because I don't think Artemis II and Starship, but when we're going to see both SLS and Starship out there at KSC, so you'd have 39A Starship Tower with a Starship, and you'd have 39B with an SLS. When do you think that'll ever happen?
Interesting question. So we know from Elon Musk that the timeline is to have Starship capabilities at the Cape around late 2025. That's they're saying. Like, I would caveat that with that's gonna be interesting on a timeline. I mean, they have a tower, but from what we know, they have to do major refurbishment, and also they don't have. From what we see, they have not started producing vehicles yet there. So I think it's gonna be rather tight on having Artemis 2 and Starship both on the pad at the same time. I feel like Artemis 2 might launch before Starship arrives at the pad. I think, honestly, Artemis 3 is probably your best shot, where we both first see 2 rockets at the same time at the Cape on the pad.
Very good. Yeah, I am looking forward to our KSC flyover this when we have both of those vehicles out there, because the path that the helicopter takes with Julia, Max and D has one area where it's behind the VAB, and it's a nice panoramic shot of 39A and 39B, which I personally love. And I would probably one day say to Adrian, whatever you do, stop doing it, because we need a metal print of this in the store. Because I don't care about a DPI. I don't care about any of that. I just want that on my wall, because it really is it's one of those iconic shots. I remember the first shuttle launch videos I ever saw. They had a helicopter shot from behind the VAB just showing the launch, and I always found that a beautiful, beautiful angle to take a video of a launch for space shuttle. So I hope they do something similar. I think Artemis Day actually did have that shot as well from behind the VAB. And it was because it was a night launch, it was beautiful because it lit up the entire area. I'm going down a rabbit hole a little bit, but I am looking forward to the future there where we see these big rockets, because I think most people here maybe aren't childs of Saturn. There are quite a few who were around during the Saturn program, but this is now our generation and even the new generation's time for big rockets, and it's exciting to say the least. Philip, I want to talk about your channel. You have your own YouTube channel where you can go loose on your evaluations of the Artemis program and such. I have now created a Nightbot command where it does !Philip, and it should. Yes, it does. It works. Amazing. I've done something correct already today, which is a rare for me, where it actually links to your channel, because Ron Smith notes that looks like one of the big schedule questions for Artemis 1 is now answered by Philip per your Artemis update videos. So that is your channel with your videos on there. Do you want to talk a little bit about your channel?
Sure. I mean, there's so much going on in spaceflight right now, and I wanted to be able to go down talking about rabbit holes. I mean, if anybody's read a sampling of the stories that I've written for NASASpaceflight, they get pretty detailed, and so I wanted to be able to go into a little more detail for it's a smaller audience that's going to be interested in a 20-minute answer versus a 2-minute answer. But I hoped that there would be at least a little bit of an audience for doing that, and it's also just the way that the nature of NASA communications has changed in the last 5 years. So what you get on a weekly basis now is, a little bit of information and some pictures, and there's enough. I have enough background to be able to, embellish that a little bit. But I think a YouTube channel and a visual presentation makes more sense on a weekly basis, or on that type of basis for reporting on the Artemis programs. And in particular, it's going to basically be the government operated programs, because the proprietary programs they have fewer. They don't have as much of an obligation to be transparent. You can argue about the degrees of that, but NASA still has some obligation to keep the public informed. I mean, if you've watched the channel at all, you know that I struggle with how well they do that these days. But the idea is to go into some more detail, and we can talk a little bit about this here, hopefully as the sun rises, about like with the mobile launcher. But I'll talk about as an example, I spoke with Cliff Lanham again. He's the senior vehicle operations manager for Exploration Ground Systems, so he's in charge of stacking the Artemis II vehicle and getting it ready for launch and handing it over to Charlie Blackwell Thompson, who's the launch director. And so one of the things that I asked him about is some of the modifications they've made to the mobile launcher. And so, you can go into that, you can go down those rabbit holes, and that's what the channel's for.
Very good. Yep, absolutely. Because I think it's important that, especially SLS, I mean, we obviously, this channel is mainly dominated by Starship for several reasons. One, because that is what is probably the king of rockets right now with the public interest. The fact that we've got so many cameras at Starbase, and so on and so on, it is obviously a thing. But that, ironically as well, we talk about communication. It's not like SpaceX puts out a PDF every day or takes, would you like to interview? They don't do that. Literally, what we're covering with Starship is, from what we can see, we're a bit luckier with Starship because we can literally watch from across the road in the public area, and even on our own land in the public area, which is just across the road from the big rocket. Whereas at KSC, we have our cameras in the press area, which took forever to organise, but thankfully we got it, and that's what the views you're getting from here. But apart from that, you can't just plop a camera at Stennis. You can't just, watch engine testing from that. You've got to rely on their live streams. There's lots of caveats with this NASA program in the coverage we can provide. So whenever yourself, Philip, for example, can add more commentary and more information out there, it's probably much needed, because there isn't much else out there, is there? It's very rare to see regular updates from the NASA side on this massive program for NASA.
Yeah, and I seem to recall being on a rare appearance on like a Starbase Live, where we were talking about it's just I think to some extent a generational difference between NASA has its sort of historical roots in the Apollo era, and you still see, I mean, we're looking at the vehicle assembly building. There's still a lot of infrastructure and institutional things about NASA that go back that far. SpaceX it's an institution that started much more recently, and so I think SpaceX is willing to allow the public to watch what it does to some degree, especially at Starbase, and I think that's just, it's a difference in philosophy. It would be possible for other companies to do what SpaceX does. They choose not to do that.
Glorious timing with our live coverage. I was discussing, bless them, Gage and Gav were, especially Gage, we were moving the cameras around during the dead of night as they left 39B. And we were discussing when we were going to do some live commentary. And I said, well, there's this point of the crawlerway where I think it'll really work. and hopefully it'll be sunrise. And it's worked out so well. The sunrise is happening now. You can see in this shot 39B on the left, 39A with the previous Apollo and shuttle, and now for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, fixed service structure, and the tower for Starship. All in view here with Mobile Launcher-1 coming back, and the previous shot showed the VAB as well. So this is perfect. I am quite happy about all this timing because that's exactly what I was hoping for. I just want to quickly thank... Oh, there's a water truck, by the way. The water truck. Everyone thinks, I still see it to this day, people think it's some kind of like celebratory thing. When they do it like port when new ships are... And when they do the
like
the thing at
confetti.
airports. Yeah. It's not. No, it's technical. It's needed, as we described earlier. I just want to thank a few people. Telstar did a Red Team membership, gifted a Red Team membership earlier. Bideford, good morning, Bideford. You're up early. Has gifted 5 Red Team memberships. Bideford is always supporting us in our streams, and it is appreciated and noted, by the way. And by the way, Adrian, I heard you talking. Let's take a Starship question and save Philip from having to answer every Starship question. I can answer this one myself, pretty much. It's from Joe and M, who asks, can you theoretically move Mobile Launcher 2, I'd say Mobile Launcher 1 as well, down Highway 4? I'll transport Starship on it. I think it's too wide for Highway 4.
Yes. Also,
Yes.
I had the... Let's just say luck to drive on Highway 4 before, and I'm pretty sure no. I feel like that would be way too wide, and I also have the feeling this heavy structure might just. Highway 4 is not in a great state as it is, but I think after Mobile Launcher 1 or 2 would roll over it, that would give it the rest. So. No, please don't do that. I don't think that would work.
If you're a little bit like me, I'd love having a quick look around KSC on Google Maps. I've always found it fascinating. I always bang on about the road to nowhere in the fork between 39A and 39B, and then it was going to go off to the theoretical 39C. And I just find that stuff fascinating. You will see how wide the crawlerway is. Then go on to Starbase in South Texas and look at Highway 4. It literally is a single lane road, either side, going down towards the beach. And that is all it still is. And they are doing some modifications to it, but as far as the width of it, no way would it get down there. As far as the Starship transportation question, I can go a little bit left field with that because there are still talk about the potential of Starships being produced at Starbase, sent on a barge, to KSC, and I would assume to the Turn Basin, because that is the obvious place to take it, to the Turn Basin, and then held inside the VAB in a high bay. Philip, can you remind me the high bays, because I keep forgetting this, of the allocation of the high bays, because there is a spare high bay where they could theoretically host a Starship booster, let's say, and then they've got the high bay for Artemis, and they've got I think another high bay for work they're doing with the engine sections, something like that. Remind me if you can remember.
Sure. Let's see. So on the picture that we're looking at, we're looking sort of to the northeast. This is, I think this is from the OSB2 building. So the NASA logo on the VAB, the closest high bay is high bay 1 to that, and that is that sort of open high bay. So in this still, high bay 1 is the lower right. Upper right is high bay 3. That's where the mobile launcher is going. That's the SLS integration cell. So that's where they'll stack Orion and SLS eventually. Upper left is high bay 4, which is it's a staging place for solid rocket booster segments. Eventually, exploration upper stage, and then high bay 2 is lower left, and that is now leased by Boeing for core stage final assembly. And we finally saw some pictures of the integration platforms are going up in high bay 2. They started at the beginning of the year, but they just started talking about that, I guess, last month. So that's like the first time they talked about it in like 2 years. So it was nice to see that was actually starting to that they're willing to start talking about that.
Awesome, and this is a good opportunity to thank Mr. Ryan Caton, who's producing this stream and is doing the graphics for us right now, which I've always found completely hard to do with my magic pen. Here we go. Look at this. He's live chatting to you all with the magic of Magic Pen. That's amazing. But yeah, Ryan's...
Good dedication there with the "You're welcome, Chris" as well.
Oh, I can screenshot and ask for a metal print of that, because that was awesome.
No, absolutely not.
Oh, I love metal prints. Yeah. My wall, by the way, is literally covered in metal prints from the NSF store. A little bit of a store pin there for you, but it really is interesting. The VAB has always fascinated me. It's such an incredible building. And of course, this view here right now is beautiful because we're seeing it come towards. Now, the fun thing is the other side of the VAB is where they're working on Mobile Launcher 2. Which is being a subject of much conjecture recently because of the way the costs are rising on that one. We have seen in the latest flyover photographs, Mobile Launcher 2, the base is making quite a lot of progress now. They haven't started building the tower on top. I think we heard in L2, we can leak it as well, Philip, if you can remember what the actual comment from KSC Sarge was. But I believe they're going to start working on the tower part of Mobile Launcher 2 next year.
Yeah, they're I got something from PAO also. So the sort of diagonal structure that supports the umbilical tower to the base. You can see it on Mobile Launcher-1. So they refer to that as the chair. And so in the flyover pictures, I think you can see some of the structural elements to the lower right of the chair, to the lower right of the base. And so those are supposed to go up in the fall, so between now and the end of the year. And then the tower sections, I think they call that operation the rig and set. So the jack and set operation in May was when they picked the base up with Crawler Transporter 2 and put it on the pedestals at the East Park site, which is what we're looking at here on the left. And so, yeah, the chair would go up in the fall, and then in theory they'd be ready to begin sometime in the winter. So after New Year's, probably they'd be ready to start stacking the umbilical tower sections on top of the base.
Very good. And again, the cost. Do we want to? Sorry, Philip. I'll let you carry on.
No, but I just want. I just want to chime in. Like, how similar is ML2 to ML1? Just curious. Like, how big are the differences?
There's they had to do a lot of weight reduction because the SLS vehicle, the two upgrades they do increase the weight of the SLS vehicle, beginning with the exploration upper stage, and then the solid rocket booster upgrade that they're working on will. It's maybe not as much of a weight increase. And yeah, thank you for that graphic is what I was thinking of. But you can see that the structure. I think they were talking about using titanium for some structural elements to reduce the weight of the structure because you get into we were talking about Highway 4. The crawler way is only rated to support has a maximum support weight, and so they were getting close to that when they were talking about. I mean, if you go back to Apollo, when they were talking about Nova, when you were in Constellation, which didn't last long, but when they were talking about trying to roll an Ares 5 vehicle out with the 5.5 segment boosters and 10-meter wide core, they were starting to threaten the crawler way weight limits. So anyway, they're trying to they have weight limits for the crawler way and the weight limits for the crawler transporters, unless they were going to try and beef them up even more. So they've tried to reduce weight. They've incorporated a lot of improvements. They've also obviously have to incorporate support for the exploration upper stage. It's a much bigger stage. It has all the avionics for the vehicle pretty much are going to be up in the EUS because it's now sort of a more traditional upper stage than the current SLS rocket, and it also has to support the SRB upgrade that they're going to fold in eventually, and they've also apparently scarred it to, in theory, support a cryogenic third stage. So I know there's been some talk about trying to marry the Centaur with the Centaur upper stage with SLS. The only thing that NASA's talked about is, in theory, because it would be expensive, using that as a possible third stage. But I would say, realistically, I doubt that would be competitive with something like Starship, for instance. They would need to do something like that really for only things like planetary flights. And so I don't know that we'll ever see SLS fly anything except exploration Orion type missions.
Thank you. I learned a lot of things here, including that my Lego set is soon to be outdated.
Quick thanks to Jax Oliver, who asked a question I think is more of a ULA thing. Where's the banana for scale? I'm sure that's a ULA thing. Actually, ULA use whales for scale. I've noticed that for their payload volume masses and what have you. Pez, I'm going to butcher your name here. Pez Ode Predita. I'll put it on the actual ticker so people can actually read what it actually says as a name. Gift a Red Team membership. Thank you for that. Very much appreciate your support. I'm going to go back to Philip because this is another question that comes up quite a lot. Isn't it more like 400 days if we are to believe the current timeline? So let's talk about Artemis 2's launch date. The biggest, should we say, roadblock towards the launch being on target is potentially Orion's heat shield, would you say? Because the SLS sounds like it's on track.
That's the one that we're waiting for sure, which is NASA has to decide whether they want to fly the heat shield that's on the Orion spacecraft as is, which has the Artemis 1 design. During the Artemis 1 reentry, they saw some char material come off the heat shield in chunks, which they were not expecting. And so they spent a lot of time trying to understand that behavior, and so it sounds like they're still talking about that. And we don't really know when they're going to decide or when they're going to announce it. So, you hear some rumors from time to time about maybe some internal decisions, and so we really don't know whether they've decided and are just not ready to announce it, or whether they haven't decided yet. But in terms of sort of between here and the end of the year, the two things with Orion are just processing the spacecraft and it being ready to stack for launch, and then this heat shield decision. And so they're both going to drive the schedule. If they chose to replace the heat shield, then we're talking about a long delay, so probably at least a year. If they decide to fly as is, then Orion has to. They're waiting for a new set of batteries to be repaired, and so Orion and then they're going to go back into the vacuum chamber to do a second round of vacuum tests in the altitude chamber in the ONC building. And so that will be this month, but what that means is that they won't be able to sort of button up the spacecraft. They have to put on the service module fairings for launch. There's a bunch of things like pressurizing, like the balloons, they call them crew module uprighting system, the balloons that they inflate after splashdown to keep the spacecraft upright. Those are filled with helium. And they don't want to pressurize those because they're high pressure until they know that they're going to go out and get into the processing to stack. So what it looks like is the spacecraft's not going to be ready to be handed over from Lockheed Martin, who's the prime contractor, to Exploration Ground Systems until it's probably going to be a couple of more months and closer to end of the year, beginning of next. And so there's a question even right now whether how much margin they have left for September. But I think that's the heat shield decision is going to sort of drive whether we're talking about is 2025 still possible versus if they decide to replace the heat shield, then it's, we're talking about 2026 and maybe closer to 2027.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with the heat shield because they had a lot of people forget there was the initial test of the heat shield with EFT-1. And now, if anyone remembers that in chat, remind me if you do remember this one. That was when Orion was launched on the Delta IV Heavy. I thought that was a fascinating mission. I really enjoyed that. And that was what should have been the validation of the heat shield, but they found the results from the Artemis I's Orion's return, where they weren't particularly happy with some things. Hopefully, that is mainly NASA being very cautious, which I do always hope they will be. And then they do the evaluation and decide, well, it's actually okay, it's understood, it's within our realms of understanding, and that will then keep everything on track. Ryan is absolutely amazing at finding things I'm talking about within seconds and showing videos of it. I can't believe it. I mean, I was surprised when he was finding like the VAB shots and whatever. Look at this. There is EFT-1's launch.
With, of course, a beautiful and amazing looking rocket that I want to point out here. Absolutely gorgeous.
Now retired.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah, it actually doesn't feel real to me. It still feels like a current rocket to me.
Yeah, you will never see Delta IV Heavy fly again. It's a weird sentence to say, but it's gone.
Right. Well, there's two more. I mean, the ICPS is technically a Delta second stage, so we still have two of those left. Just to point out about the heat shield. So the EFT-1 heat shield took the Apollo design, which was there is a structural element to the heat shield that attaches it to the pressure vessel of the Orion crew module, and then the actual heat shield that flew on EFT-1 was the Apollo-style honeycomb structure, where they took the avcoat material, which is the ablative material, and it's injected into hundreds of thousands of cells. The difference between Apollo and Orion is a larger. It's the same outer mold line, same aerodynamic shape as the Apollo command module, but it's bigger. And what they found was they had issues manufacturing that at a bigger size, upscaling it. And then they also had some structural issues that they found. And so they switched on Artemis 1 to a heat shield where you just have that. It's a titanium carrier structure. And then they glue large blocks of avcoat to that. It retains the same aerodynamic shape, but those are glued. They're large blocks, and so it's easier to manufacture. But that was the first flight of it, and in addition to it being the first flight, it was also the first time that the heat shield had seen a lunar reentry. So it's a faster speed, and it also, it's not a linear increase in temperature. That the heat load that it sees is much higher than the heat load that the EFT-1 heat shield saw. So the last flight was the first flight, and so I think the issue is that they just don't have enough test flights to do this. I mean, they're, in theory, we've heard some talk about. I don't know that it's necessarily internal, but some talk about maybe flying instead of throwing away the heat shield that's on the Artemis II spacecraft right now in a vacuum, just saying, well, why don't we just fly another uncrewed test flight? And so you could fly this vehicle, this spacecraft next year. The issue is, do they have enough Orion spacecraft and particularly SLS flight hardware to add another uncrewed test flight into the schedule? But you end up with this chicken and egg thing, which you see, and the SpaceX is dealing with it in a completely different way, which is they're going to flight test, rapidly iterate on their design through flight test, but that's the most, that's the highest fidelity test environment is real thing. And so they don't get a lot of shots on goal with Orion and SLS because they can't fly very often. And so you end up, like I said, with this kind of a chicken and egg thing, where it would be great if they had at least a little bit more flight hardware that they could do additional tests, either additional uncrewed tests, or you could do maybe like a high Earth orbit test. But they're sort of stuck with what they have right now, which is a very low flight rate system.
That is something that always comes up as well, the flight rate, and it's very hard to compare the systems, but when you hear, and again, these are claims, it's yet to be proven about Starship launching every single day, because it's fully reusable. It lands, gets refueled, and launches again. That's a long way off. That is a long way off from happening. Yes, of course, it's going to be a much higher cadence system, but SLS it's by design. I mean, this is what the vehicle is, and there's lots of caveats we can provide with this. I will just give a bit of a movie quiz reference, because people always ask me about the launch on the film The Martian. They're saying, is that the SLS? No, that's a Delta IV Heavy. They just took the stock footage and created the launch from that footage. They didn't use the actual rocket that would be launching a crew to Mars or whatever. But it's this is where we're now getting some great views of the crawler transporter. Is it CT2, Philip? I can't remember.
Yes, they only converted one of them. Yeah. This is, again, because of the money. They only converted CT2 to be able to carry this much weight.
There we go. I should be more confident with my answers, Philip, because I do know these things, but I always question myself, and I think, well, Philip's on the stream. I'll just ask him the question rather than stating the facts. But there we go. I wonder, Ryan, via the magic of Enhance, if we could have a nice little zoomie. Everyone chat, if you all do hashtag Enhance, then we'll have the command in chat where we can have a look up this tower section, because this is amazing views we're getting right now with the sunlight and with our cameras. Our own cameras, by the way. These are our cameras we have on Space Coast Live all the time. And we can have a look up the tower here, because here we go, look at this. Enhance is happening. Chat has demanded it, right, and now we're getting it. There's CT2.
CT2 is stenciled on there. So
there we go. I mean, these are amazing crawlers. I absolutely love these crawlers. They're just fascinating to me. I remember there was talk of a super crawler being created at one point, but that never came to pass. Here we go. We're going to go up. You can see there which we call rainbirds. They are where the water gushes out during launch itself as a sound suppression system. We're going up the tower here.
What that primary structure in the middle of this tower, is that like just the elevator shaft, or is that because it has this wave pattern, which is a bit interesting? You know what I mean, right? It's not straight.
That is I don't know that it is only the elevator, but that is where the elevator is. One of those differences between Mobile Launcher 1 and Mobile Launcher 2, and again, slight tangent, but this mobile launcher, and particularly the structure, was originally built for Ares 1, and so another difference between this one and the new one is that the new one is purpose built for SLS. So one of the things one of the issues they had on the Artemis 1 launch is that the elevator doors are actually facing the rocket. That did not work out so well, and they have hardened the structure. That's one of the reasons that they stayed out for so long out at the pad, was hardening the structure and doing all the testing and validation on it. But the I was going to say there's a if we look at the bottommost umbilical, and just above it there's a structure that they've added, and I'm actually checking with public affairs. I wanted to confirm this because this is something that Cliff Lanham talked about. The bottommost umbilical is, so if we stop right, well, it's actually kind of hard to see, but there's a bar that's running. Right. It's actually kind of it's at the top of the screen right now. There's a bar that they welded to the structure.
That metal bar there that goes from,
right. And so they're building something called a contingency pad access system, and the idea would be to give them more flexibility for the situation they ran into with Artemis 1, where they had a couple of scrubs and they ran out of the lunar launch window. And this was like the first two attempts were, within about a week of each other, and then they ran out of time, and they would have had to wait for 2 weeks. And they're still negotiating with the range about how much time they're going to have. But the idea would be they're designing, and they're going to build a structure that will attach to the umbilical tower and give them the ability to go inside the boosters and the core stage to reset the flight termination system. And so if they didn't have any hardware issues and they just got caught out by weather or something that they could fix at the pad, that would allow them a little more flexibility in terms of, it would be almost impossible right now for them to roll the vehicle from the pad back to the VAB and then just roll it, and then get it, reset the flight termination system and then go back out within 2 weeks. It takes too much time. And so that the only thing they needed to do right now was they wanted to avoid welding next to loaded solid rocket booster segments, and so they wanted to do that while they were out at the pad. And then the rest of the system is still being designed, but it would in part attach to the umbilical. I still need to work on that before they came back. That was one of the things they needed to do before they came back inside the VAB.
I'm kind of happy that they try to avoid welding next to loaded solid rocket boosters. That's very that's good. I like that. Please don't do that.
It's a person-friendly environment when you avoid doing that.
If we can
absolutely.
If we can go back to the enhance again, because we wanted to talk about the umbilicals, because we can actually just, when we were just going up where we were before, where Philip was talking, Ryan, because there's this like a triangular structure. People are asking in chat, what the heck is that? That's the vehicle stabilizer. And that is literally how they keep the tall SLS rocket on the pad when it naturally sways in the conditions and the vibrations. That holds it pretty much. It's a stabilizer. That's what it's called. It's called a stabilizer, isn't it? And I remember they're doing some tests, and it was almost not the same, but it was similar to when they did Pogo tests in the VAB with the Saturn V. That in that era, they literally had tug of war with engineers pulling the Saturn V, and some of them kicking it with their feet to make it rock on the launcher pad. It was amazing. But that literally is the stabilizer arm, isn't it, Philip?
Yeah, we were talking earlier about the shuttle orbiters. Some of that moving of the orbiter was from the rolling, but there's also just wind loads, and so there's actually two attach points. It attaches to the very top of the core stage, on the forward skirt, and so it's basically it gives them. The vehicle is so heavy, the solid rocket, the solid propellant in the boosters is so heavy, it could probably handle a certain amount of wind load without this, but this gives them a lot more capability and margin to be able to roll out and be at the pad without stressing out the aft skirts or any of the other structures on the vehicle.
And I think this stays in the same position on Mobile Launcher 2, but the other ones, there's some movement with the umbilical arms, because obviously the Block 1B is taller. So they actually have to do Mobile Launcher 2 for the different heights of the umbilicals. But I think the vehicle stabilizer stays where it is. I think it's more about the upper stage difference, because of the US, the actual arms are actually higher on the actual tower. Is that correct, Philip?
I believe so. I think they were talking about maybe having another stabilizer arm, or maybe enhancing that since the vehicle's taller. But yeah, the second one will be a little taller, and the crew access arm will be, so you replace the ICPS umbilical with the exploration upper stage umbilical, and then again, like all of the enhancements and other things, like again, like positioning. You would have the elevator doors. You would want those to face away from the rocket. So they've done things like that, and some of the things that they learned during Artemis I, they incorporated into the design of Mobile Launcher 2.
Elephant in the room. These are all like synergy questions here because I was basically going through to the Block 1B because Owen Ross asks, do you think Block 1B and 2B variants will actually come to fruition, or will they just rely on the launches? That is a question that's a valid question. Do you think, especially with the EUS situation, do we think they need the Block 1B for a start? And do you think Block 2 will ever happen, Philip? Because I've never really been a big fan of Block 2 for some reason. I don't know. I'm trying to think back to why. But I thought Block 1B pretty much catered for everything they needed, unless I'm completely wrong with that, Philip.
Well, they are building the structures for the first exploration upper stage, and the supply chain is engaged for sure to develop to build and certify and qualify all of those parts, but it is going to still be it's going to be closer to the end of the decade before EUS is ready to go with the mobile launcher. I mean, hopefully they can do better with the development schedule, but I know there's been some talk about using Centaur as a substitute for ICPS. That would solve the ICPS. The ICPS is a little bit underpowered even for SLS, and so you end up kind of on the margins for even just sending Orion by itself to the gateway orbit. So EUS does that and more, but I think that's that there's some arguments that you could make in terms of ICPS has gone through the entire process. You have a mobile launcher here that supports it, but ULA's I don't know what the disposition is of the tooling to continue to build those stages. I'm pretty sure that they've cleared the floor in Decatur because they need it to build all the Vulcan vehicles that they need to support that manifest. So, really the issue is just for any of these stages. There's the old saying that rockets aren't Legos, but you could make anything. They made the Delta cryogenic second stage work with SLS, but it took a lot of years and I think it's ended up being close to $1 billion for 3 flight stages and all of the support. And so the question is, how much would it cost to make another upper stage happen? For example, the Centaur, the Centaur 5 idea, the question would be, how long? At what point would you break even if you were going to stop work on EUS and move to that stage? Because there certainly is a question of what do you need? Do you need that capability? There's a good deal of operational flexibility that the EUS provides, but if it doesn't fly very often, what else do you need it to do besides fly Orion to the gateway?
I'm still not fully a fan of the exploration upper stage, by the way, I have to say. Like, I know I said that before, but I really think it's a weird thing that we are always talking about testing before flying crew, and we are always with these other providers doing demo flights of everything before they are good to go, and then we have the exploration upper stage debuting on a crewed launch. Like, that just feels weird for me. Maybe that is not weird for people who have been watching this longer than me, but I watched this like the whole commercial crew program, and for me it's weird that they just pull out the EUS and be like, yeah, that's fine on a crew launch.
The fun thing about the US for me is when I first saw it, I thought 4-engine upper stage, this is going to be real capable. It's going to have the capability it need. I was back in the time where they were looking at cargo missions like Europa Clipper, which is kind of ironic because that was originally going to be planned for SLS. SLS certainly bid for it. And that is ironically going to be launching very soon from this area, from KSC, on a Falcon Heavy. So it's kind of weird how everything has come past because a lot of the comparisons, I've got a question again, the synergy of me mentioning that is because GeoHound asks, and this is one for you, Adrian, do you think Dragon would replace Orion if there was too many problems with the Orion capsule? Because right now, people talk about Starship and, Starship and HLS. Those crew will be launching on Orion. It then dock with the HLS Starship. So it's not a case of launching from the ground like at Starbase or KSC for the HLS program. They're going to launch on Orion. Now, can Dragon cover... let's say Orion has a major issue and it's down for years. It can't be launched. Can SLS Artemis move to utilizing Dragon for HLS?
Not without talking about major modifications of everything, because yes, Dragon at some point had the idea of like White Dragon, I think it was Grey Dragon and Red Dragon. So it was like there was ideas of going beyond low of orbit, but of course that's not in the current requirements of Dragon anymore. And there are some things such as radiation protection that need to be adjusted if you go beyond LEO. And that's not the case for the modern Dragons right now. They're not really built that way to do that, and also to support a mission to the moon or anything. So I think, could they do it with enough lead time and enough money? Probably. I mean, at that point, you can probably do anything, but I don't think it would be comparable to the Dragons we are seeing currently fly. I think it would certainly need some major modifications. And still then, Dragon is versus Orion. Orion is big, and very suited for what's supposed to do. So I don't think Dragon would be a full replacement of Orion if it ever would be in a case, and we are talking about Orion being grounded for years, and they wouldn't be able to modify it in time for even being advantage here.
Yeah. Also, reference to the countdown clock, which is causing some amusement still, that we're now only just 7,984 hours to launch. If the launch
inside 8,000 hours.
Yeah, we should definitely put an X post out about this.
Is this like terminal count now? Like, are we allowed to call it that, or?
No, we're not.
Probably not.
The joke is funny for a while, but related to that, providing the schedule holds, because we've been talking about Orion's heat shield being a caveat to the launch date being on track for where it stands right now. If it all holds to the current launch date, Altar asks, when can we expect the SLS rollout for launch at 239B? That's one for
that would be that the actual launch would be, or the rollout for launch would be very close to the launch date. So, I was asking what's the date we're counting down to here, and we have to pick a date because we don't know. That would be something that I would have already asked PAO if I thought they would give me the information, which is what are the launch windows in the late summer, early fall of 2025 for Artemis II. They already know the dates, probably down to certainly the minute, but they have not released them. What they'll need to do is they will need to synchronize. So I was talking about the pad contingency access thing and that bar that they'd welded to the umbilical tower. Well, when they get down to it, they would only use that if they went out to the pad for a launch window and they missed it. So they're going to have to do the same thing they did with Artemis 1, which is they're going to have to synchronize when the vehicle rolls out to the pad with whichever launch window they pick. And so what they're going to do in the meantime, so we might see, we're probably going to see SLS roll out to the pad once or maybe even twice before the rollout for launch. The first time would be for a tanking test, and that might be without Orion. And that would probably be in the case where Orion's schedule was later than normal. And they would basically, they don't need Orion to do a tanking test of SLS, and they want to test out some of the infrastructure that they built out at Pad 39B in the last year and a half. So we might see that. And then it might go out again if they've talked about maybe doing something more like a full wet dress rehearsal. And the difference between a tanking test and a wet dress rehearsal is, maybe philosophical, but you could see, for instance, getting the vehicle into stable replenish in a tanking test and then calling it a day versus a wet dress rehearsal where you take the vehicle through the entire countdown, you go all the way down inside the launch sequencer handoff, and then you cut off right before engine ignition. They've talked about that, and they've also talked about possibly doing like a dry dress rehearsal like they do with the Dragon ISS crew rotations, and letting the crew go through the entire launch day without the vehicle being fueled, get in the vehicle, do all of the launch day checks, and make sure that they can get crew ingress timeline sort of fit into the window that they have, because they have a limit on how much time the crew can be on their backs in Orion, and they have to work that with the 2-hour launch windows they have. So if I had it, I would guess we see SLS roll out to the pad at least once before the launch.
We had a little bit of iffy communication from Philip there. I think we got definitely most of the words, so it was fine and not to interrupt him. But yeah, we're just a little bit of chat was noting it. I was just making sure we acknowledged that it was definitely the case. A little bit of an iffy connection there, but we got all the words. If we can pan to the left, please, because I want to talk about the big things poking out on the left-hand side. Please, Mr. Ryan.
Kevin Michael Reed's personal shower.
Let's move the camera, please, boys and girls.
Always takes a bit.
Gage. Sorry, Gage. Oh, poor Ryan. I thought Ryan had this camera. We can move this camera to the left. I did preempt it. We're going to look at the tail service mast umbilicals, please. There we go. Those are the big things pointing out. There's some synergy here with the devices you see there. We zoomed right in. Thank you, Gage. With the booster quick disconnect that you see at Starbase on the tower there on the orbital launch mount, because that is literally what it is. That is what connects the LH2 and LO2 lock, to the core stage of SLS, and that's literally how they fuel it. It goes through the fuel lines there. It's got electrical connections and communication connections, and it's a very similar device to what was seen on the Space Shuttle mobile launch platform. And there's some great videos that I should have actually queued up for Ryan, but I will show it in various times. Probably might show it during Raptor because we'll be talking about this booster quick disconnect during that as well. And you can see that when the connections are severed at T0, they pull back the connection arms, the plate itself, and then this door closes real fast. And it's quite fascinating to watch how it closes so fast to protect it. And that is exactly what they're using at Starbase. It's the same kind of like methodology of it. So it's a really cool thing to point out there. We also might be able to see the water trucks, because I know that Ryan's a big fan of the water truck, which we've been talking about previously, which is spraying water down on the bedrock of the crawlerway. And we might see it spraying some water for us. Oh, it might be hidden behind that building. Yes, it might just be a little bit bad timing there. There is a water truck that is leading the procession back to the VAB, and that is be spraying water. I think you can just see the cab at front, which will be spraying water. I might be moving in a second, but yeah, I was just bad timing with the water truck. But Ryan will capture it when we see it. It's behind the building. Yes, it is. I do have an elephant in the room question.
Look at that.
That's getting sprayed by it.
That's Das and Kevin like 2 seconds before getting a free shower.
Bap Shag. Why do people pick usernames that I can't pronounce? Bap Shagro, whatever. Why are the mobile launchers so expensive? Is it just mismanagement, Philip? What do you reckon?
There's definitely some government bureaucratic red tape overhead. But also, if you read the Inspector General report that was released, I think it was in August. They did not have there's another one of these chicken and egg things where they did not have the exploration upper stage and SLS Block 1B design nailed down before, and so if you were just going to do a waterfall thing, you would have, you would know exactly what you were designing to, and you would just design it and do it. But they're basically designing Mobile Launcher 2 in parallel with making changes to exploration upper stage. And when you make changes to the launch vehicle, then you have to propagate those to everything else. And so the estimates, this is something that you see with a lot of government, at least in this industry for sure, which is it just makes sense to underestimate how much it's going to cost to do something, because that Congress is more likely to fund stuff if they think it's going to be cheaper, and Congress has done this basically since Apollo, which is they would rather pay more over a longer period of time than just, except for Apollo, pay for it all up front. So I usually will joke that if you funded Starship development the way that they flat funded development of the mobile launchers and Orion and SLS, it'd never happen. So the way that they're funding Starship development is the way that I think NASA would love to have funded this type of development. But if you say up front that the mobile launcher 2, I think, is going to end up costing something like $2 billion. The original contract was only $400 million. So if you'd gone to Congress and said, well, it's going to cost $1 billion, which is huge, but if you'd gone with that more realistic number to them at the front, they might have said, well, that's just too expensive, we're not going to do it. So that's the kind of game that gets played with some of this government contracting stuff. And I think this is one of the things that I've sort of come to the sort of preliminary conclusion is that Congress seems to want, they are preserving this capability, but they aren't trying to fly it. It's like they're spending enough money to preserve the ability to fly Orion and SLS maybe on an annual basis, but the way they've funded it, that's pretty much all that you get. Is you get that, and you get this low flight rate, and it would probably have cost more upfront to invest in infrastructure and improvements. But now you're stuck with this because they only wanted to pay so much upfront.
Yeah, it's the question that's always followed around NASA projects since I started following NASA. It really has been a case of the way it works with NASA is funded by the government, so there's always going to be questions. I want to thank Space Videographer, who's become a Padrack member. Thank you very much for your support, and welcome to the membership areas. Shia has also done super chat. Thank you very much. To our fearless presenters, just want to say good luck. We're all counting on you. Movie reference. Thank you very much. I always like a movie reference. About the water truck. Here we go. There we go. Timed it well. There is the water truck doing its thing. It's quite amazing actually, because I think they've got 2. And they keep replenishing them because they obviously haven't got enough water to do the entire run. So I think they've got 2 water trucks in these rollbacks, Philip.
At least, and you can see the number on the back, and you can see, we were talking about this before about trying to keep the dust down. So you can see, since they're spraying in front of the crawler, the idea is for it to go over wet, wet gravel, so that it and then that keeps the dust down as much as possible.
Awesome. This is great view. A few people have already in chat. I do read live chat at the same time as reading the panel and watching the actual stream itself. And quite a few people are making references to how the crawler transporter reminds them from Star Wars, from the crawlers on there. There's actually a device at Starbase. I think it's a dance table or something like that, which actually really does look like the crawler from Star Wars. You know, Utini! Those people. That really looks like it. But the crawler transporter was the original, because of the tracks, reference to the Star Wars. Yeah, I've seen that many, many times. I do love the crawler transporters. I think they're amazing. Really are. And we are now rolling back where we get the point where the crawler transporter and the platform itself will hide behind the launch control center at KSC. So that'll be the time where we end our commentary, but we will be continuing coverage live on Space Coast Live with our camera views as we do 24/7 from KSC. And we'll also have a Raptorside chat at Starbase at 2 p.m. Central Time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern Time for those people who are on the Florida time zones. On our Starbase live stream. We've got so many live streams. We've even got a McGregor stream as well, which is also fun because that is the world's most busiest rocket engine test site in the world. Whereas for SLS, they utilize Stennis, which is the fun synergy there of the rocket engine test site. And Stennis itself is now becoming quite a commercial prospect. They're doing lots of tests for Rocket Lab and for Relativity Space. They're not just SLS engine testing there now. A few more questions before we end up, because we've still got some time, we've still got some good views, which we want to continue showing. Adrian, I always bring these questions to you, Adrian, because I think I know the answers. Joan asks, why can't they let SpaceX build a new mobile launcher? They'd be done by now. I'll start off by saying, first of all, you can't really compare the systems at Starbase with the mobile launchers at KSC. The mobile launchers are far, far more complex because they are everything in one go. Whereas at Starbase, you're talking about the tower, which they built so fast, everyone's saying, well, look how fast they built that tower at Starbase compared to Mobile Launcher 2. You can't really do that comparison. You've got to take into account the orbital launch platform and everything involved. I'll let you talk, Adrian, because I think you're on the same page as me on this.
Yeah, so of course, first off, the requirements of this mobile launcher are driven by NASA. And the company SpaceX is not really a company that has experience building such complex mobile launchers. That's not what they do. And you cannot really compare the structures, like how they transport Starship. It's just a different vehicle, how it is set up and how it is rolled out. For example, the mobile launcher hosts all the launch infrastructure, which is that's not the case for transports in Boca Chica. And B, as we heard before, it's way more heavy because you have the fully fueled SRBs already on there, which add quite a significant chunk of weight. So that's kind of like it's a very apples to oranges kind of thing in terms of requirements. And I do not think SpaceX is known for or would be really that interest of constructing a mobile launcher platform for NASA. And I just don't think it's a fit. I think are we aligned there, Chris?
Yeah. Again, yes, of course. Obviously, there's been schedule and cost issues. As Philip intimated with the GOA report and things like that, we know it's nothing perfect. We know that they could have done better. But again, the ultimate comparison that the internet tends to like to go towards, which is, well, SpaceX could have. It doesn't really work in this case. It's very Apple. They are same structures. They're similar jobs that they cater for with the rockets, but they are very different systems. Now we're just starting to see the mobile, the crawler transporter, CT2, as it says on the side there, which tells you which crawler transporter it is, rolling behind the launch control center at KSC with its firing rooms, with amazing buildings. I never get bored of looking at, look at this view here. I never get bored looking at these views. It's such an iconic thing that is embedded into my memory, and I'm sure a lot of people in chat's memories from going back through to the shuttle era, and I'm sure some people in chat will remember the Apollo era as well, which is just amazing to think of the history of this area. It really is beautiful. I am going to say that we're going to end our commentary soon because it will roll behind the launch control center, so we won't get the same views we've had previously, but again, Space Coast Live will continue to cover it. But I'm going to take one final question that isn't even related to the Control Transporter or the Mobile Launcher 1, which is what everyone is asking. Best guess for Starship Flight 5. I'm not going to go around the houses asking this one because I'm just going to simply say, watch this space. We are watching very carefully. People think because we've not been tweeting left, right, and centre speculation that we're not keeping an eye on this. We are very much keeping an eye on Starship Flight 5. We are expecting some news to drop soon, we hope. But again, we're just going to report what is out there, which is both what we can see with our own cameras at Starbase, the FAA stance as it stands right now, which is what Adrian got last night, which is no change, but that is subject to change. Keep an eye on things. Yes. We'll discuss it further on Raptor Side tonight, but we are very, very aware things may change dramatically soon. It may change dramatically soon. That's all I'm going to say. We don't want to say something that's not officially out there yet.
I want to quickly add to the statement of the FAA. These kind of statements are always accurate until they are changed. So if you get the statement now, it could be a totally different statement tomorrow based on new information, based on a new situation. So just putting this out there, that can always happen.
Absolutely. So on that bombshell, let's enter this coverage, because I just wanted to do a quick one for Starship. Obviously, it's the main thing of interest out there right now in spaceflight, and it would be doing a disservice to ignore it simply because we're covering Mobile Launcher's return. But we have covered Mobile Launcher 1, Artemis, SLS, Orion, everything relating to what is just now nearly 8,000, just under 8,000 hours to launch. I'll never get bored of saying that. But let me thank who's been on this stream with us, starting with, of course, Philip, who I'm now going to spam his YouTube channel so that people can subscribe to his channel and get some good insight into SLS. Thank you for joining us, Philip.
Thanks, and I'll keep going. I will be talking about this more on my channel in the next video, of course.
There we go. And also thank you to Adrian for popping in. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Thanks for having me. It was always nice to talk about SLS finally again.
And I'm going to give a special thanks to Gage. I would even allow him to come on comms and say Gary the Grackle fan club, but I'll do it for him. But who's been moving the cameras, not just during this stream, but also during the night, all the way through the night. Very much appreciated. He's appreciating the Grackle reference for looking after the cameras, because a lot of the work goes in when there's not a lot of people watching around in the middle of the night on Space Coast Live, and it's kept us coverage going of this mobile launcher return from its departure from 39B all the way back to the VAB. So this has been really worked out very well indeed. Thank you, Gage. And also thank you to Mr. Ryan Caton for producing this stream, who's been amazingly finding resources as we were talking to show on screen at the same time, and I couldn't have Googled it that fast. So he's done very well there. Thank you to Ryan Caton. I've been Chris Bergman, no one's bothered about that, because rightly so.
And also, just quickly, Gavin also tracked, just to add that.
Oh, Gavin deserves special praise as well, because Gavin not only was doing some tracking for this, but everything Port Canaveral, where we are on Space Coast Live, with the returns of the drone ships and the fairing returns and the recovery ships, all the comings and goings, and especially now with Blue Origin involved at the port, are all thanks to Gavin. If a ship moves, Gavin knows about it. And Gavin is amazing for working on Space Coast Live and all our resources on the port side as well. So thank you indeed, well said, Adrian, to Gavin, who is very much a very important part of our team. Okay, I do long-winded outros, and that's what I'm very conscious of. So I'm going to say thanks for joining us, and until the next stream, which is Raptor Side at 2 p.m. Central Time, goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
And here we go.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RTPA chamber pressure looks good.
Rolling up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight down to FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?